Hello! In this video I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on Classic WoW prior to playing the demo available at BlizzCon. I was going to script this video, but running out of time, so I'm not going to be able to do that. And I know this is probably going to get lost in the shuffle. Everybody's excited about BlizzCon, but I wanted to put this video out as a point of reference for setting my expectations and seeing whether or not Classic WoW meets them or doesn't, or maybe even exceeds, my expectations for the game. Now, before we get started talking about actual Classic WoW and what I think is going to happen, I think it's important to provide a little bit of perspective, like where I'm coming from, to have an anchor point of, what was my experience and what can I reasonably expect to get from Classic WoW. And that's going to start back in middle school roughly. I was a huge fan of RTS games, played them all the time, every single one I could get my hands on. I think the most defining RTS games that I played for me personally were Warlords Battlecry 3, StarCraft, and Age of Empires 2. Now you'll notice that Warcraft wasn't in there. I did play the Warcraft games, including the expansions, but I think the most prominent one, Warcraft 3, I kind of caught on the tail end of my whole RTS phase, and I wasn't as into RTS as it wasn't that big of a deal for me. Come around to senior year of high school, and I remember looking at a magazine and seeing a big article about this game called World of Warcraft. And I looked at it, and I was a huge video game nerd. I had a video game club in high school, and that's where I remember talking to people about this game and looking at it, and I just remember saying, I really want to play this game. It looks really cool, but I didn't have a great PC at the time, so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to play it. After I graduated, I went straight to work. I was able to build my first computer, and that's when I got into World of Warcraft. I had a friend at work who helped introduce me to the game. He had a max level human warrior. He was raiding, all that kind of good stuff. So I had someone to help kind of guide me into the game. So that's how I got into World of Warcraft. And that was roughly about a year after the game came out. It took about a year for me to get a PC, build it, and all that kind of stuff, and get up and running in the game. Once I did, I spent a lot of time doing kind of what I do now, which is trying all sorts of different characters. I didn't pick one character and just dedicate myself to it, get to max level, raid, and get the best gear. I played several characters, and I mostly did a ton of dungeon running and a ton of world PvP. Those were the two things that I loved to do. After playing a Night Elf Druid for about 8 levels, I said, screw this. I went Horde, went to an entirely different server from my friend, so I couldn't play with him. And I rolled a Troll Hunter complete with a randomly generated name, Jinjainu, and I just started playing the game. And along the way, I met one of my good friends that I'm still friends with to this day. He was from Venezuela, and he had a guild, and we would just go out. He was playing a Druid at the time, and we would just go world PvP, go in Darkshore, hide in the lakes, pop out. He'd lure him in, and then I'd come out, on my Druid or something, and we were just, wreck people. And then as we got more and more into the dungeon scene, that's where I kind of took over, and eventually I'd make, a guild for people that just wanted to run dungeons and level characters that way. So it was a pretty good time for me, but I never got to max level. I think I got to max level, but I never did any raiding in vanilla. And then my best experiences in World of Warcraft were actually with the Burning Crusade. That's the first time I got to high level. I raided on a couple of different characters. I did the majority of the raids in Burning Crusade. I did a ton of dungeons, tons of alts. I played a lot during Burning Crusade and a lot during vanilla, but Burning Crusade was the first time I spent a lot of that time at max level doing in-game max level things. So, as I've been looking back on my memories of what I did at that time, what I liked about WoW, what I didn't, I'm finding that more and more stuff keeps coming up. I think back to the time when I played, and it's so long ago, at this point it's like 13 years ago, I think. I was, fresh out of high school. It's a whole different world for me now. I'm married, I have my own house. I don't have any kids, but I have a bunch of pets. I've worked a lot of jobs. I've been in the military, all kinds of crazy stuff that I've done. And that seems like a completely different me back then. I was working overnights at a grocery store. as like a lead stalker, and I had tons of free time, so plenty of time to invest in the game. I had people that I would, play with, and friends from all over the country that would, team up, and we'd get on Ventrilo if somebody was paying for it. And, we'd get on there and we'd do our dungeon runs and hang out and help each other out. And that was a lot of fun. So when I initially started thinking about Classic WoW, I was looking at it and saying, well, I don't think I'm going to like it. And the reason that I don't think I'm going to like it is because I'm not the same person that I was back then. I don't have the same kind of time to invest in a game like this, or maybe I just don't want to invest the time that I have in a game like that. Also, for me, a lot of those memories are tied to those specific friends that I have or had at the time, some of which I'm still friends with today, and I remember all those people. And for me, going back to play Classic WoW without them seems weird. It seems kind of bittersweet. And overall, I've said to myself, well, I think Classic WoW might be kind of a novelty. It'll be fun to go back and kind of relive some memories. Well, over the past couple of months, everyone has been talking about Classic WoW. Lots of prominent YouTubers are talking about it. I've been, dredging up more and more and more memories of Classic WoW. And I've come to the determination that there are a lot of things from Classic WoW that I have fond memories of that I just don't remember, right? That are they're back there somewhere, and it's taking a long time to pull all those memories back up and to remember those things. And every time something new comes back, it's like there's a little bottle that's getting filled up with excitement. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. I actually liked that about World of Warcraft. That was fun. I like this aspect. I like that aspect. And the biggest hangups for me with Classic WoW have always been slower paced gameplay and the inability to do anything solo. Because for the most part in World of Warcraft nowadays, what I do is primarily solo stuff. Or I use the looking for group tool to, do my dungeons or raids or whatever it is that I'm going to do. I tend to use those features so that effectively I can just kind of play the game on my own time. I'm not trying to schedule things with other people, and I'm not trying to, dedicate specific brackets of time where it's like, yep, we're definitely going to do this. It's like, whenever I feel like it, whenever it works for my personal schedule, that's when I can get on, I can play, I can get stuff done. And I would say that a couple of things have really, really gotten me excited about Classic WoW. So the first are the talent trees. Now, I'm not a fan of talent trees where you just go back and you're like, +1 strength, reduce the cost of your ability by 5. I think those talents are stupid and boring, and I still think that a lot of the talents in the talent trees in Classic WoW are stupid and boring, and I don't like them. What I like about the talent trees is that they provided you with a really viable way to come up with weird hybrid specs. You just had a way there where, effectively what you could do is you could go all the way down a talent tree to the bottom and still have, that took about 30 points. And then you still had 20 points or so that you could put into one or both of your other talent trees. You could split them. You could go, 10 talent points into each tree. You could go, full on all of your points to fill out one tree and then toss the leftovers in something else. You had this ability to do stuff like that. So, one of the things I did, because this talent system was still in for Burning Crusade as well, is, when I started leveling in Burning Crusade, I started leveling as a balance druid. And I, went all down the balance tree, but then I went into the feral tree and I picked up some of the guardian druid talents that made me much more tanky, much more beefy. And so I could just roll in to whatever zone I was in, gather up a bunch of, enemies and just nuke them down while I was just sitting there with all this armor withstanding their attacks. And being able to do stuff like that kind of have a little more flexibility in what you're doing with your character, I think made for very interesting gameplay for me personally, because I like to do the weird stuff, the different stuff. I'm not necessarily a min-maxer. I like to have a lot of utility and bring a lot to the table. In Classic WoW in particular, on Druid, you could spec so that you could effectively kind of hybrid roll any of the different dungeon roles where you could go into a dungeon and say, hey guys, I'm going to do pretty good DPS, but if we need an off tank or the tank dies or we need extra heals or the healer dies, then I can pop in and I can do that role. So that's one of the things that I really liked about Classic WoW, and one of the reasons that I'm excited for it, because the reality is, if you look at the talent trees that are currently, that are from Classic WoW, a lot of the stuff that's in the talent tree is stuff we just have by default now. For example, Deep Wounds is a warrior passive that causes your targets to bleed over time when you deal certain types of damage to them. Well, that was a talent you had to choose in Classic WoW. And so when you look at it and you're like, wow, I'm going back to I have to choose to have deep wounds, that doesn't seem good. But the thing is, the entire game was built around, you having the talent into that particular ability. So it's not like you're nerfing yourself, because you're going back to a state of the game where that was normal. That was something that you were expected to be able to do. So it's not like, you're not stripping all these abilities away and putting yourself in modern WoW. You're stripping all these abilities away and putting yourself in Classic, and I think that's perfectly fine. So I think that is going to provide a lot of interesting ways to play the game, especially for someone who's going to play multiple characters. The next thing that I'm kind of excited for Classic WoW is the fact that you had to coordinate and work together in dungeons. And that's something that I've always loved about World of Warcraft. Over time, I feel like that has rapidly dropped off. Just generally speaking, Blizzard has had to essentially make ridiculously hard dungeons with affixes to get people to have to coordinate and cooperate to do those dungeons. But I liked just going into a dungeon in its normal state, and it wasn't that you couldn't do the dungeon with an okay party, because you could, but you could do it way better, way more efficiently if you had a team that was ready to utilize their special abilities, polymorph this target, sap that target, okay, we're going to stun this one. All those kinds of things that required you to talk and communicate with each other were there in a dungeon content. And because it took so much longer to level, you got to spend a lot more time with those dungeons as well. It wasn't like, hey, in the next 3 hours I'm going to be leveled past this entire expansion's worth of dungeons, so see ya, goodbye. You got to spend a lot of time in those dungeons, and I've always been a big fan of dungeons style content, that 5-man, compressed style of instance content, and so I'm excited to be able to do that again. And then I think the final thing that I'm really excited about for World of Warcraft Classic is connecting with people in the game again. And I think you can take this one of two ways. So in the current game, we have the looking for group system, the looking for raid system. You've got all these ways to insta-queue into a group. And I've mentioned before in my 5 ideas that I think would make WoW more fun, that I think one of the problems here is you're not incentivized to actually connect with people and make lasting relationships. And I don't necessarily think that that's wrong. Okay, I don't think that that's wrong. I think there are plenty of other ways in the game to make friends and things like that. And you don't need to be forced to do it through dungeons necessarily. But I like that. I just said dungeons are what I really like to do. So being able to meet people that way, I think, is very valuable. And I think you could take this one of two ways. You can say, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the patience, I don't want to sit around in Stormwind or Orgrimmar and just say, looking for healer for, Uldaman, looking for healer for Sunken Temple. You can say that you don't want to do that. And if that's the case, then that's an obvious bad turnoff for you. For me, though, I feel like it's a positive. Depending on how they do the servers for Classic WoW. So one of the reasons that I think it's hard to want to connect with people and make friends and all this stuff is because there's so many people playing World of Warcraft on all these different servers, and you can't trade with people on different servers, and there's all these ways that, yes, you can play together, but you can't really be together, I guess, you know, is maybe the way that I'd phrase it there. Like, yeah, we can both jump into a dungeon, but I can't trade you some, you know, profession mats, or, you know, I can't give you some gold if you need some help, or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. Like, that connection is lost. And then because the dungeons are so quick, the leveling is so quick, you don't know, like, oh, well, when's the next time I'm going to see this person again? It's all likely never. Or if I do, I will have seen so many people between now and then that I probably won't remember who you are. And I think that if they do classic WoW servers the way that, you know, WoW servers were in vanilla, where essentially, like, you couldn't connect to people on different servers. It was the people on your server, that was it. Even if they do them like mega server style, where, you know, there's a lot more people on a single server, if they do it like that, where there's no cross-realm, you know, zoning things, then you aren't really able to just randomly blow people off and do things like that when you're playing the game. It behooves you, it's in your best interest to try to find competent people to play the game with. So when you run a dungeon and you find a tank who's, like, you know, killing it and doing a great job, or at the very least is willing to communicate and talk with you and work with the group to get the dungeon done, or a healer, or a good DPS, you know, all that kind of stuff, you're really incentivized to say, hey, not only do I want to be like, man, you're doing a good job, I want to be like, hey, can I add you to my friends list? Do you want to do another dungeon? You know, do you want to go do some PvP? What do you want to do? And I think that's where you're really able to make those kind of connections. So that comes down to a matter of, like, whether you want to do it and whether you're willing to do it. Originally, I thought that this was going to be annoying, it was going to be frustrating, and I just wasn't going to care because I haven't been doing that group style content in current World of Warcraft. But the more and more I've thought about it, the more that I realized that it wasn't that I don't want to make those connections, it's that those connections don't feel as valuable or necessary to me in current World of Warcraft. And if they're bringing everything back the way that it was in original WoW, it's not that I necessarily think the system is better or worse in one or the other, but I think that you're rewarded for those behaviors, for, you know, connecting with people, adding them to your friends list, communicating with people. I think you're incentivized to do those actions, and you're rewarded for those actions much more in that kind of a setting. And that made me realize that that is really what I would like to do. I would like to connect with people. I'm doing it here on the YouTube channel, and, you know, it's fantastic getting to occasionally run something with one of the viewers, or just talking to you guys in chat, or corresponding with you in comments. Like, it's just a good feeling to feel like you're part of a community and you're part of something. And for me, I'm getting excited for Classic WoW because of that. So what I want to know here is, are you excited for Classic WoW, and why? There's plenty of reasons that I think you would have to be excited for Classic World of Warcraft that I just haven't remembered yet. So I'm really interested to see what you think is going to be interesting. Also, if you're here and you're watching this video, how interested would you be in maybe like a channel community or something for World of Warcraft for the types of content that I'm talking about, you know, running dungeons together and you know, things of that nature. That's something I'd be very interested in possibly setting up. Who knows? Maybe I'll play the demo and realize that with all these good memories and everything else going on, like, it's still just way too slow paced, or, you know, maybe it's not everything that I quite, you know, remember. Or maybe I'm blending too much Burning Crusade into vanilla, and, you know, that's kind of tainting my memories of, you know, what I liked about the early days of World of Warcraft. I don't know. That could be the case, but I wanted to put this video out just so that I would have a point of reference, so I can play the demo and come back and say, hey, I was right, I was wrong. Here's some stuff I didn't even think about that I found out in the demo. You know, it was brought back to my memory. So, you know, we'll see what happens. We're less than 24 hours away from being able to get to play it. So, just a reminder here at the end, if you like the video, like it, check out some other videos, and subscribe if you think it's worth it. I will be here tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, 30 minutes before the opening ceremony, setting up to stream the open ceremony, react, and hang out with anybody who wants to jump into the stream and chat with me. I would be ecstatic for you guys to be there and be celebrating all things Blizzard with me. And then tomorrow at 8 p.m. Central, I'll be hopping on to do the BlizzCon Demo. We do have the timing available for that now. It looks like you can play for 60 minutes, take 30 minutes off, and play for 60 minutes again. So chances are I will probably be playing for 2 to 3 hours on the Classic WoW demo tomorrow night, with some 30-minute breaks in between where I'll either go off stream and take care of some stuff, or I'll switch over to World of Warcraft or some other casual game and just kind of wait out those 30 minutes. So I'm excited for tomorrow. I'm excited for BlizzCon. I hope you are too. Thank you for watching as always. I appreciate it. I hope you're doing well and having a great time in World of Warcraft, and I'll see you on the next video.